This episode is sponsored by Tidybox, branding, marketing, and graphic design. Hello and welcome back to Film Pro Productivity and Success, the podcast that helps film professionals and other creative people to live a more focused, effective, and happy life. My name is Carter Ferguson, and this is episode 99, To-Do Lists. When you make a to-do list, you should also make a not to-do list. Warren Buffett was asked about the secret of success, and he said that it was saying no to almost everything. Some of those little tasks won't matter as long as you get the big tasks done. Brian Tracy, unquote. I chose that opening quote quite deliberately as it segues very nicely into last week's show, opening and closing doors, and making difficult decisions about what is important and unimportant, as well as urgent and non-urgent, is just another essential productivity skill that you have to enact. Please go back and listen if you want to understand exactly what I mean when I'm talking about opening and closing doors and getting things done without distractions and overwhelm. But today is all about to-do lists, and what is there to learn about them, I hear you cry? Well, quite a lot as it happens, so listen up and settle down for another exciting, or at least vaguely interesting, I hope, episode as I tell you more. And I've been toying with this episode topic for a long time, and I nearly called it Making Your To-Do List into a Do List, as I felt it made it a little bit more immediate, but then I thought I should instead be calling it Turning Your To-Do List into a Done List. But both of these titles assumed that people could create a half-decent to-do list on their own in the first place, and that's what brought me full circle and back to this, which is really going to be about to-do lists in general, how to create them and how to get the best out of them. To-do lists themselves come down to planning, so that's what I want to get into first. How much time do you spend on planning your days? 5 minutes? 10? How many of you spend no time at all on planning and just go with the flow? And if you do that, how's that working out for you? Well, as you're listening to this show, I'd guess you probably do at least try now and again to make some plans, but creating a task list should not be some secondary thing that you try to do as quickly as possible. In fact, the more attention you pay to your next day's to-do list, the more likely the list is going to be realistic and achievable. And that's really my first tip here. Don't rush in creating your task list. Spend some time on the planning and isolate yourself from distractions, and that way you can actually think the tasks through before you put them on your to-do list. I can see when I work with others on this sort of thing, not only how little time they actually spend planning, sometimes as little as 30 seconds, or really sometimes none at all, but how that time is squeezed into their day in a very it's like an unwelcome chore. Try to spend at least 15 minutes with your list when you plan it, and put that time aside uninterrupted at a point in the day when you still have energy, not as you sit down during an advert break binging the latest big show on Netflix, but perhaps instead during an earlier break in the day with a cup of tea and no distractions. Some people have mentioned to me that they just don't like having to-do lists. They say it stresses them out, but Psychology Today author Peg Streep explains that most people love to-do lists because the act of making one makes them feel more in control, and for those who procrastinate, gives them the illusion of being proactive. And she says, note the word illusion, because if you don't act on the list, you haven't accomplished anything other than creating it, unquote. And my second tip about to-do lists is that the very act of mentally organising your work can take a huge lot off of your mind, leaving you satisfied that in some small way you've made the world a better and a more organised place. And when you plan your days, you begin to truly understand the tasks that you're about to do and what it takes to accomplish them. And this is necessary because you are then able to identify and make progress with the tasks that matter the most. And far from causing you stress, this action of planning will at least lay out a path for you to follow through to completion. Mark Twain said, The secret of getting ahead is getting started. The secret of getting started is breaking your complex, overwhelming tasks into small, manageable tasks and starting with the first one, unquote. And that really represents my third tip for creating achievable to-do lists. If you haven't broken down your larger tasks into smaller pieces, it's probable that you're not going to get them done. This is something I cover in my episode, How Do You Eat an Elephant? The short answer of which is, of course, one piece at a time. So split large, complex tasks down into smaller, more edible ones to make those to-do lists more achievable. The devil is in the detail, as they say, and again, this comes down to point number 1, planning. Tip number 4 is you should have separate lists for your tasks and your goals. The idea is not to put goals onto your task list at all. I've covered goals in multiple episodes, so I don't want to go on all about them again, but I also don't want you to get confused here either. Successfully completing your daily to-do list tasks will lead towards your larger goals, but goals and larger desires in general are not something that you want to achieve over the course of one day. For example, if you want to write a feature film script, that's a goal, whereas writing 5 pages of your feature film script is an achievable to-do list task for a day, if that makes sense. The ability to simplify means to eliminate the unnecessary so that the necessary may speak. Hans Hofmann, unquote. And that one leads me nicely to tip number 5. Brevity is a virtue, so keep it brief. By doing so, you can quickly look over at your list and know what needs to get done. And how you can do this is by focusing on the keywords of specific tasks and not dragging them out. For example, say your email inbox is a mess and you want to clean it up. Instead of writing a lengthy sentence, keep it short and write something like, respond to emails and delete spam for 30 minutes. Or simply just write respond to emails or deal with emails. That way, you're spending less time writing the task and you're relying on trigger words to get your mind to recall specific details for the task. And I'll call this next tip number 6, although it's kind of in the same vein. You may also find that putting a limit on the number of items on your list will make that to-do list all the more achievable, although this simply may not always apply. It might not always be possible. Giving you an exact figure on how many tasks you should have on your daily list is kind of difficult. It really depends on your situation, but I'm happy to say that anything between 5 and 10 tasks should be enough for a day, although certain tasks may be very, very quick, so it's easier to include more of them on certain days as well. And I should possibly have talked about this next one first, as it's a vital productivity skill in itself. But tip number 7, and it won't be a surprise to some of you, is to prioritize the items that are on your to-do list before you even start. And the most important items on your list should be known as MITs. They don't have to be listed known as MITs. In the productivity world, they're known as MITs, which is most important tasks. So when planning your day, make sure that the important tasks are at the beginning of your list, and this ensures that you can get those tasks done as quickly as possible. Another way to look at this is to tackle the largest and most intimidating task first. Mark Twain talked about this one too. He said, if it's your job to eat a frog, it's best to do it first thing in the morning. And if it's your job to eat 2 frogs, it's best to eat the biggest one first. And Brian Tracy wrote a book on the theme. He says, eat that frog. If you have to eat 3 frogs, he says, eat the biggest and ugliest one first. And you'll be tempted to do the easier tasks first before getting onto the bigger task, because it just seems like you'd be easing into the day. Really, that's the way I sometimes consider it. But the problem is that these tasks, even the easy ones, drain away your energy. And if you have a really big task to complete, chances are that it's going to be on your mind over the course of the day. And that means that you're spending energy just thinking about it. And all of that wouldn't be a problem if that big, intimidating task was dealt with first thing in the morning. And I should also clarify here that the most intimidating task may not be the most important one or even the largest of the day. It could be something, and from my own experience, as simple as making a difficult telephone call or just dealing with an urgent and potentially costly admin task like putting in late accounts, for example. A good follow-on to that one is to eliminate unnecessary tasks. So go through what you have written down and decide if you really need each one of them. This is tip number, what is it? Where am I at? Tip number 8. And I can now use my favourite Peter Drucker quote, which covers this very well. He says, "There is nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all." And it's such a key element of productivity that I want to burn it into your minds. And so I will repeat it once again. There's nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all. I mentioned this earlier in passing, but give yourself deadlines is tip number 9. Always remember Parkinson's law, that which basically says that work expands to fill the time allotted. And I don't want to go into too much detail, but it's a fact of life that just can't be ignored. If you have to submit a report, say, for some reason, and you've been given a week to do it, you'll likely work on it on and off throughout the week, and you'll perhaps even put it off until the night before and then finish it then. But if you're given that same task and allotted, say, an hour to complete it, you'll likely still get it done, but you'll prioritize the main important points and highlight those points rather than fill it with unnecessary fluff and overwriting. And you can avoid this by simply giving yourself deadlines. When it comes down to to-do lists, my suggestion is to just give yourself a day to complete the tasks that are down there. That is enough pressure and incentive for you to work hard on them. And if tasks continually slip off your day planner, then you may be giving yourself a perpetual way out of these scheduled plans. So tip number 10 is to make yourself a promise that you will complete the tasks you have allotted yourself on time, and only put back tasks if you absolutely have to postpone them. Don't be afraid, though, to look at your to-do list and make changes to it, as there may be a possibility that your to-do list in the first instance is getting lengthy and you've set yourself unrealistic expectations that you simply won't be able to finish it at all. By giving yourself the opportunity to revise your to-do list, this could possibly be a separate one, but by giving yourself the opportunity to revise your to-do list, you're allowing yourself to spread out your tasks rather than having them clumped up. And this might help your mindset, as it could mean that you're not overwhelmed by the list in any one day. But back to my original point here, just be careful that psychologically you're not fooling yourself and deliberately putting off tasks from one day on to the next. It could be coming down to laziness or procrastination. Be aware of that one. Tip number 11 is to use checklists for complicated tasks, as this will allow you to ensure that you're getting everything done the proper way and that you're not missing any key steps. Checklists, I'm really into them. I don't have many of them myself, but I do have things like when I'm doing the podcast, for example, I do a certain series of tasks, more or less the same way every single time, and I think it would be worth my while writing them down in case I do miss them, because I have made errors in the past. And two episodes in this series, I've accidentally copied over my notes for them. I mentioned it in another episode. I've done it again since then. So checklists for complex tasks might help you to avoid that sort of problem. And not a million miles from that is to batch similar tasks, which is tip number 12. So look at your list and find out if there are similar tasks there on your to-do list for the day that you could batch process together. And this way you can get certain tasks off of your list faster and easier. And if you want to know more about batching, then jump back to episode 95 from this season, where I cover that topic in some detail. If new tasks come up as you work, note them down, but don't do them right away. This saves you the bother of having to dwell on that idea that you've just come up with, rather than focusing on the task at hand. It also saves you from having to recall later on what the task is when you come to write it up for the next day's to-do list at the end of the day. And that's tip number 13. I'll just repeat it for you. If new tasks come up as you work, note them down, but don't work on them right away. And that's number 13. Number 14 is something I talk about quite a lot. Don't just delete your tasks as you complete them, but put a line through them instead. In fact, what I'm saying here is to create a done list. A done list, because that will give you inspiration. And the example I like to give is the cycle of productivity. If you omit the well done phase, that part of your day where you actually kind of look back at what you've done and say to yourself, well done. If you omit that part of the cycle in which you are congratulating yourself on your efforts, then you're setting yourself up to short circuit your productivity, and giving yourself a pat on the back for what you've achieved will help to give you drive, and that drive will help you to complete more and more things in future. It's a vital part of productivity. Number 15, do some prep. Make sure that you prepare for certain tasks in advance because it'll make your life significantly easier as you go along. I batch prepare the ideas for the show with a small amount of research on each one to get me thinking a few days before, or even the day before, even on the morning where I'm going to work on a show. I might have a little bit of research and then go for a swim, so I'm thinking about it. And I'll even make up promo images before I even think about recording sometimes. And you might think that this is part of tip number 2, which was organising your work, but it's not really what I'm talking about. That's about organising the to-do list. When I say do some prep, I mean prep the tasks that are on the to-do list themselves and build that into your strategy. You might even put the prep for a to-do list you know you want to do on the previous day's to-do list, so you're really, really ready for them. And as I said before, the devil is in the details, so don't forget that. Prepping the work can make it all go much faster when you actually come to handle those tasks. And tip number 16, there's a lot of them. I think there's 19 altogether, just so you know. The tip number 16 is to utilize technology. There are various to-do apps out there, like Remember the Milk is one, which I've only found out about that one today, but it looks very interesting. And there's Asana as well. There's plenty of them out there. Just do a search on your app store, and I'm sure some will present themselves. But find one you like and use it. And if you're into the Pomodoro technique, which I cover in episode 86, then use an app like Forest to help you get things done as well. If you prefer, of course, you can always go analog and use good old paper and pen and an oven timer for the Pomodoro technique instead. But have a system there. There's just so much technology these days, and a lot of it is free up to a certain level that you should really consider integrating it into your systems. I sometimes struggle with figuring out how long certain tasks are going to take, so I'll chuck in another little tip here to help you with that. And this is tip number 17, and it's to track your recurring tasks, which will allow you to figure out exactly how long they take. And this helps you to plan your day better, as you know how much time a task takes, and if there is a certain time slot in your schedule that you'll be able to manage to fit it within. So I'm not very good at that one. That's one I'm going to try and take on myself, to try and track how long some of my tasks take. And I'm hoping that the change to the podcast that's going on, these shorter episodes, will mean that I can really tell how long an episode's going to write. Because this episode I'm working on, that I'm recording right now, this has been about 6 hours, around about 6 hours at the point I'm recording it, because the topics have been so broad. But I'm hoping coming down to one small topic at a time will allow me to make those tasks, those future episodes, a little bit more edible, because I can't keep on going 6, 7, 8 hours recording one show. It really is a massive interruption to my life. But the new shows, the new format of the shows seem to be working well, so let's see how that goes. Tip number 18 is to understand that transition times eat into your time. That's one of the benefits I probably didn't mention when you're batching. If you're doing a whole load of stuff, I probably did mention it, but I'll mention it again. If you're batching a whole load of things together, you're not spending a lot of time rewiring your brain to do the next thing and the next thing. So understand, tip 18 for this one, understand that transition times eat into your time. Make sure that when you plan your task to-do list, this extra transition time is also included into those plans. Adding an extra buffer between tasks will make your list more flexible and realistic. And finally, Tim Ferriss suggests that you should compile your to-do list for tomorrow no later than this evening. And that's my final tip, tip number 19. If you do it too far in advance, the situation, the tasks are very likely to change. But if you leave it till the day itself, you are eating into the time you should be using to complete the task list. And that's not to say you shouldn't plan weeks and months in advance for certain things, but the specifics of a to-do list should be left until the day before. And as I said earlier, try and find a point in the day to do them when you've got energy, not last thing at night and not squeezed in between and the advert break sketched down onto your phone or whatever. Take a little bit of time aside to do it. But number 19, compile your to-do list for tomorrow no later than this evening. Okay? I've leaned heavily here and there on today's show on an article from headspace.com, and they wrap up the article with a load of questions which you might want to, and points which you might want to consider. And these are more or less lifted directly from there, but I think they make some truly excellent points. So here they are. They ask, what else do I have in my schedule? And this question refers to your personal schedule. For instance, if you're traveling, making sure that your list reflects that you're traveling. Don't try to overstuff your list with too many tasks, since it's more likely, because you're traveling, that you'll only get a fraction of them done. One thing that comes up quite often is if someone's got a part-time job, that part-time job while you're doing it is going to take up quite a lot of your time, so you can't achieve the same amount of stuff in that day as you would on a day that you have off. It sounds logical, but it's just one of those things. So always think, what have I got in my schedule, and alter your to-do list accordingly. Next, and these are great terms, is this task a gatekeeper? The question asks if the task is blocking other tasks that need to be executed. Let me explain this. Every once in a while, we might have a task that has to be taken care of first. And after you've done that, only then can you take care of the following tasks. I'll be tackling gatekeepers of a different type and in this form in another episode, because I think this is well worth looking into. It's definitely a thing. I come across gatekeepers in different forms all the time. It's a productivity thing which is not touched upon often, but that's an important one. Is the task a gatekeeper? Yeah. Next up, and here's another great term, do I have icebergs on my list? I fall for this one quite often, and the question asks if your task is actually much bigger than it seems. Sometimes when you start working on a task, you'll soon realize that it's much bigger than what you initially thought. And the iceberg reference is, of course, about the fact that only the tip of the iceberg is above the water with the majority of the ice below. And if you spot one, use tip number 3 and break it down into smaller, more manageable parts. But if you hit an iceberg because you've not spotted it in your preparation, it will kill your to-do list for that day. So icebergs are definitely a thing, and it's a fantastic term for it as well. And finally, another thing they say is the task distraction proof? Not all the tasks are created equal. Some tolerate more distraction while others require your full attention. I think what they're getting at here is that some tasks could be done while you're walking the dog, for example. I can listen to a podcast while I'm walking the dog, but I couldn't write a podcast while I'm walking the dog. So is the task distraction proof is a really interesting and useful question. Could you be listening to a podcast while you're making the dinner? You get where I'm going at? Could you do two things at once? Is it distraction proof? Really good one. That's why I had to include these. They had some great points in this article, and I've of course linked to it in the show notes. And the article covers a few other great tips that I want to pour in here. These are really just statements more than questions. Try to eliminate the sources from your tasks. This is done by reducing your commitments and limiting the projects that you have. The fact is that the more commitments or projects that you have, the more likely they are going to end up as tasks for your daily list. And one thing I hate this is kind of associated with it, I hope it's a good reference. One thing I hate when I'm responding to complex emails and getting them behind me is and I'll sometimes spend a couple of hours just responding to a difficult email, and I'll send it off. And then the next thing, I'll get this short, ill-thought-out reply from someone I'm writing to 5 minutes after I spent the 2 hours dealing with it, and that causes me even more hassle. I'm just saying that one, but you could have some element out there that is causing your tasks to become more complicated or just to grow exponentially. Try to eliminate that. It could be a client that's asking you for changes and stuff like that. Limit the amount of changes they're getting asked. One of the worst things that happens with clients, and I don't do that much corporate, but I've done enough to know that it's a pain in the ass, is I've done 2 productions like this. I've created something. I've been dealing with one person from the company, and then as soon as I deliver this, 10 people come out of the woodwork who've never communicated with me on the project, on the script, on how we're going to do it, whatever. We've shot it, it's in the editing phase, and suddenly I've got the opinions of 10 people coming at me, 9 of whom I've never even heard of before. So that would be another thing. I could eliminate the source of my tasks. If they're all giving me notes and I'm having to change them all, make changes to an edit, for example, then that's a nightmare. But if I can say I will only take notes through one person and that person is you, that focuses down the notes. They deal with the communications and you get more direct communication from the client. I would obviously limit the amount of edits that I'm willing to do as well. Like you've got one edit or you've got 2 edits, and that's included in the price that's gone out. I talk about production stuff because I do production stuff. Although I'm a fight coordinator, I do, and I'll hopefully be doing some more of it because the fight coordination is still very, very unstable after COVID has hit it. But this is a problem I've had to deal with a number of times. But anyway, I'm rambling. Let me go on. The last point they make is make your list a closed one. This is another fantastic thing. This comes from Do It Tomorrow and Other Secrets of Time Management by Mark Forster. In order to create a closed task list, all you have to do is draw a line under the task, the last task on the list. And when you've done this, you're not allowed to add any new tasks to your list during the day. And this ensures that the number of tasks is actually decreasing as the day goes on and not increasing. So make your list a closed one, write the list and put a line under the last one on it. Don't add anything to the list. It takes a bit of practice to create a great to-do list, but your efforts will always be rewarded if you take it seriously. And I'm going to sum up here just simply by restating all 19 of today's tips in short form. Number 1, don't rush creating your task list. Number 2, organizing your work can take a huge load off of your mind. Number 3, if you haven't broken down your larger tasks into smaller pieces, it's probable that you're not going to get them done. Number 4, you should have separate lists for your tasks and your goals. Number 5, brevity is a virtue, so keep it brief. Number 6, putting a limit on the number of items on your list will make it all the more achievable. Number 7, prioritize the items on your to-do list before you even start. Number 8, eliminate unnecessary tasks. Number 9, give yourself deadlines. Number 10, make yourself a promise that you will complete the tasks you have allotted yourself on time. Number 11, use checklists for complex tasks. Number 12, batch similar tasks. Number 13, if new tasks come up as you work, note them down, but don't do them right away. Number 14, create a done list. Number 15, do some prep. Number 16, utilize technology. Number 17, track your recurring tasks. Number 18, understand that transition times eat into your scheduled times, your work times. And number 19, finally, compile your to-do list for tomorrow, no later than tonight. And if you want to know more, there will be a full transcript of this episode and of its sources, etc., only on the official website, filmproproductivity.com. Well, that's all for now on to-do lists. Hopefully you'll get something out of that. But today I'm launching a short Indiegogo campaign as well to support the next couple of years of the podcast's website hosting as well as some marketing stuff. And it's in order to support the next 50 episodes of the show that I'm wanting to put out. So if anyone's interested, I'm posting links to that Indiegogo campaign in the show notes, and of course I'll be all over social media with it. So if you love the show and want to see it continue, I'd really appreciate your input. If there isn't interest in the show, I will shut it down and I won't do any more episodes past 100. But even if you're not donating and you are interested in helping the show along, then a simple retweet or a share on Facebook or whatever would make all the difference to me. As a productivity side note, these campaigns can often garner more listeners just by the bump in profile that comes along with them as well. So I'm hoping that running this little campaign will help the show in general. Now, next week's show is episode 100. Yes, you heard me right, 100. And in that, I'm going to cover 10 of the almightiest productivity techniques from the first 100 shows. That episode is called 10 Productivity Superpowers, and it will be released a week today. And I realise, by the way, that to-do lists are not for everyone. But I hope that even those opposed to the idea have picked up a few useful tips from today's episode. For you guys, though, let me end with a final quote, which I found along the way just for you, from Karl Lagerfeld, who said, "If someone gives me a to-do list, I say thank you, this is nice. One needs things to throw in the wastebasket. Now take control of your own destiny, keep on shooting, and join me next time on Film Pro Productivity and Success. The music that you're listening to right now is Adventures by Ihimitsu. And you can view the show notes for this episode on the official website. Only there, the full show notes on filmproproductivity.com. Please follow the show's official accounts on Twitter at FilmProProdPod and on Facebook as well, or at FilmProProductivity. I've lost the ability to speak. It's such a long episode. Anyway, please support the show by subscribing, spreading the word, and leaving an awesome review. And please do support the Indiegogo if you can.